Indiana's central location, diverse landscapes, and rich history make it an important part of the Midwest. Yet, despite its early statehood and fertile lands, Indiana has remained less populated than its Great Lakes neighbors. So, what's holding Indiana back from experiencing the booming growth seen in nearby states? Long before European settlers arrived, Indiana was home to vibrant indigenous communities. The Miami, Shawnee, Potawatomi, and Delaware tribes had established thriving societies across the region, particularly along the Wabash River Valley. But change was on the horizon. In 1679, French explorer René Robert Cavelier sailed through the area, planting the flag of New France and kicking off a period of European influence that would reshape the region forever. The French established trading posts and forged alliances with local tribes, their influence centered around the lucrative fur trade. However, the French grip on the region wouldn't last. The Treaty of Paris in 1763, ending the French and Indian War, handed control to the British. Yet, another major change was just around the corner. The American Revolutionary War erupted, and when the dust settled, the newly formed United States found itself in control of the land north of the Ohio River, including our star player, Indiana. This set the stage for one of the most significant chapters in Indiana's early history, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. This ordinance established the Northwest Territory, which included present-day Indiana, and laid out the process for territories to become states. It was like a roadmap to statehood, and Indiana was eager to follow it. In 1800, the Indiana Territory was carved out, with its capital at Vincennes. William Henry Harrison, who would later become the 9th President of the United States, was appointed as the territory's first governor. Harrison played a key role in negotiating treaties with indigenous tribes, often to their detriment, paving the way for an influx of American settlers. As settlers poured in, attracted by the promise of fertile land, Indiana's population swelled. By 1815, it had reached a level sufficient to petition for statehood. A constitutional convention was held in Corydon in June 1816, where delegates drafted Indiana's first state constitution. And on December 11, 1816, Indiana was admitted into the Union as the 19th state. But here's where things get interesting. While Indiana's statehood marked a new chapter of growth and development, with roads, canals, and later railroads facilitating the movement of people and goods, it didn't experience the explosive growth of its neighbors. The stage was set for Indiana's unique path, one that would see it grow but not quite keep pace with its Great Lakes siblings. Now, you might be thinking, surely Indiana's geography isn't that different from its neighbors. And you'd be right, to a point. In fact, Indiana is almost like a perfect blend of Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois. Well, Indiana's landscape is like a geological layer cake, divided into three main regions: the northern lakes and moraines, the central till plains, and the southern lowlands. Each of these regions tells a part of Indiana's story, and each played a role in shaping the state's development, or lack thereof. Let's start in the north. The Northern Lakes and Moraines region is a remnant of the last ice age, shaped by massive glaciers that retreated about 10,000 years ago. This area is dotted with numerous lakes and wetlands, giving it a landscape similar to southern Michigan. It's here that you'll find the Calumet region, hugging the southern shore of Lake Michigan. Moving south, we hit the central Till Plains. This is Indiana's agricultural heartland, a vast expanse of flat, fertile land perfect for growing corn and soybeans. It's similar to the western half of Ohio and much of Illinois. However, while this region has been crucial for Indiana's agriculture, it has not driven population growth in the same way that industry has in neighboring states. Finally, we reach the southern lowlands, where the landscape takes on a different character altogether. Here, you'll find the rugged hills of the Hoosier uplands and deep valleys carved by rivers like the Ohio. This very topography is more reminiscent of Kentucky than the flat plains to the north. So, Indiana has a bit of everything: lakeside vistas, vast agricultural plains, and rolling hills. It's like Mother Nature couldn't decide what to do with Indiana, so she gave it a little of everything. However, this jack-of-all-trades geography might be part of the reason why Indiana never developed a dominant geographic feature that could serve as a catalyst for large-scale population growth. At this point, you might be thinking, doesn't Indiana have any big cities? And that's a great question. This brings us to Indianapolis, the central figure in the next chapter of Indiana's story. Founded in 1821, Indianapolis was chosen as the state capital for a very specific reason: its central location. The idea was to make the seat of government accessible to all residents of the state. Sounds logical, right? But this is where Indiana took a different path compared to other states. Unlike Chicago, Detroit, or Cleveland, which grew organically as key transportation hubs, Indianapolis was a planned city built from scratch in a region that was primarily agricultural. It's almost as if Indiana strategically placed its capital in the heart of its agricultural land, building a city from the ground up in the midst of sprawling cornfields. However, Indianapolis lacked access to the international trade opportunities provided by the Great Lakes. While Chicago was becoming the bustling second city of the United States, with ships from around the world docking in its harbor, Indianapolis was landlocked, relying mainly on overland trade. This inland location had a profound impact on the city's, and by extension, the state's growth. Without the early industrialization that a lakeside location might have provided, Indianapolis's growth was steady but not explosive. It became a major center for business, education, and healthcare, but it didn't have the same historical legacy of heavy industry and manufacturing that fueled the rapid growth of its Great Lakes counterparts. In essence, Indianapolis became a big fish in a smaller pond. It drew population and economic activity from within Indiana rather than from across the country or around the world. This inward focus, while creating a strong state identity, may have limited Indiana's overall population growth. Indiana, like its neighbors, had its fair share of natural resources and economic opportunities. But it's in how the state leveraged these opportunities that we find more clues to our population puzzle. For instance, while Indiana did develop some industry, particularly in cities like Gary, which, ironically, is more a suburb of Chicago than a true Indiana metropolis, it never reached the scale of manufacturing powerhouses like Detroit or Cleveland. The state's economy remained more diversified, with a strong agricultural base complemented by various industries rather than being dominated by a single sector. This diversification had its pros and cons. On one hand, it meant Indiana wasn't as vulnerable to the boom and bust cycles that plagued some of its neighbors. But on the other hand, it also meant Indiana never experienced the massive influx of workers that fueled rapid population growth in other Great Lakes states. While Indiana might have missed out on the population booms of the 19th and early 20th centuries, this slow and steady approach is starting to show some surprising benefits in the 21st century. Today, Indiana is growing faster than any of its Great Lakes siblings. While Illinois is actually losing population, and growth in Michigan and Ohio has slowed to a crawl, Indiana is seeing steady population increases. Indiana also has a reputation for being a bit boring. It's often seen as a sea of cornfields punctuated by small towns that time forgot. This image, while not entirely accurate, has persisted for decades. And while it might make for a peaceful lifestyle, it's not exactly a magnet for population growth. Hoosiers tend to embrace this low-key identity. There's a certain pride in being unpretentious and in valuing hard work and community over flash and glamour. It's an identity that values stability over rapid change, steady progress over boom and bust cycles. This Hoosier mentality might help explain why Indiana never developed the kind of massive urban centers that its neighbors did. Just like Indiana, there's another state with a surprisingly uneven population distribution. Want to know why? Check out the video about why nobody lives in northern Florida.